Okay, we're all recording. Okay, welcome to CE 526. And I'm talking about how do we actually apply the highway safety manual approaches. I mean, you have learned the theory of it through that Empirical Bayes tutorial. You are familiar with Empirical Bayes. You have gotten some knowledge about what is all in there in the highway safety manual. And now we want to learn real world examples of that. And so I've basically opened a new module for you called applying the HSM, applying the highway safety manual. And applying this highway safety manual there is a web link that I want to share with you. So if you go ahead and click on this link, so I'm just going to go ahead and that comes from the highway safety manual website, road safety management process. And there you'll see like AASHTO safety analyst, spreadsheet tool SPICE. This could potentially be used for us to do some analysis if we are trying to apply for the highway safety performance grant. CapEx spreadsheet tools. So there are a bunch of spreadsheet tools that have been provided. Again, the predictive method, the IHSDM spreadsheet, and then the HSM spreadsheet tools for rural two-lane roads, for rural multi-lane highways, urban and suburban arterial straight route, and then the ISTAE, and that's another tool that we used for recent research for Caltrans. And then there are modified spreadsheet tools that are sort of using local calibrated data for different states. I don't think California has that kind of tool yet because California was one of the states for which the data in the HSM safety performance functions was in fact used for. So they haven't quite developed their own tools, but there are, if you end up working on a projects for different states, there are some links here for other states. And then crash modification factor clearinghouse that I mentioned to you earlier. Okay, so there are some tools here, and Michael is going to show us one of these tools, the application of one of these tools that he obtained from, I believe, from Oregon Department of Transportation. And what I've done is that I have provided that tool also on our course website. So if you go to spreadsheet 2, so HSMOR for urban suburban arterials, there is a tool like this. So if you sort of download this tool, and maybe I don't have to download it, but you could sort of see like what does an empty spreadsheet looks like, and then we'll try to see what data do we need to kind of fill up this spreadsheet and obtain a measure of how much safety improvement did you do as a result of your analysis, or as a result of an intervention. And the intervention that Michael's going to talk to you about is going to be about the edge lane roads. And he's going to introduce edge lane roads, the idea of the edge lane roads, and so forth as well. So this will, as I said, wrap up the discussion on sort of reactive safety analysis, kind of looking at retroactively what actually happened, and did we improve safety or not improve safety. And highway safety manual obviously is based off of that. And in the next session, starting next session, we'll have another guest speaker who's going to start talking about the proactive safety issues. And for proactive safety issues, we are going to be doing some field safety assessment. So we're just going to look at, okay, if you go out in the field, how do you conduct a road safety audit? You're not looking for crashes, you're just looking for conditions that might lead to crashes as a road user. So that's one thing we'll be looking at from a lab perspective, from a project type perspective. And then we are also going to be looking at what we call the systemic safety. In systemic safety, it's a step from, we know crashes, we know a lot about how crashes happen and what variables contribute to crashes. So instead of actually looking at finding lived crash experience, we just look for, okay, conditions that might lead to crashes. So we don't actually go out and chase hotspots of crashes. We chase out conditions that might lead to crashes, right? Because we know some variables that are related to crashes. even if those places crashes yet haven't happened, but we know that these conditions do lead to crashes. So we try to identify those approaches, and then and then we apply for highway safety improvement program funds. So we'll talk about some of that piece. That'll be next week. And then starting on Thursday, I will give you some information about surrogate measures of safety. This is a very advanced scientific approach now. Again, this is sort of still in development, where we don't look for crashes, we look for near crash events, because the idea is that the crashes are so few and far between that it takes a lot of time for you to assemble a large database of crashes. So instead of looking for crashes, you look for events where the drivers have to engage in sudden braking, or they get very close to other crashes. So there are surrogate measures like time to collision, just to measure how close two road users got to each other, so that you can figure out these are the locations where crashes might occur. So that would be surrogate measures of safety. And we'll have another guest speaker come and talk about surrogate measures of safety. And then we'll have a guest speaker around March 9th, who's going to talk about, how they're using video analytics to derive these surrogate measures and improve safety, and how different cities are using data analytics to do that. And data analytics, again, it does require some coding and stuff like that. And don't have a good data set that you could work on, or it's not a big data project that I can have you work on in the remaining time we have left. But this is going to give you a flavor of what you might encounter, and some of the techniques that you've learned in R might actually be helpful in dealing with that data, even though we can't really do a project like that in the remaining time that we have. And then so those will be sort of the remaining parts of the course here. So I would now like to invite, are there any questions that you guys have about the course, about anything, before Michael joins us in for next 5 minutes or so? Are there any questions about anything that is happening in the class? So you have one large-ish homework assignment that's going to be based on the discussion Michael will have today with you. And then you will have one more project about sort of looking at real-world data and doing some kind of a road safety audit of that location. So I'll have one more project after that. And that sort of, is bulk of the class now. And we'll have, some lectures and some guest speakers and so forth, talking about different things like video analytics and like other things. So that sort of is the plan for the class. Anything you guys have questions about, or? And I will have one session on topics that you guys wanted to talk about as well. So some things that I know you, at the beginning of the class, I had asked for topics that you guys are interested in. So I obviously won't be able to cover all the topics in all the details in the class, but I will have one session devoted to the fact that, okay, I'm gonna sort of look at all those responses, and I'll assemble some resources that if you are interested in that topic, where you can find more information on that. So I will have like maybe half a session of the class devoted to that too. So any no questions here at all? Okay, that's quite all right. So what we'll do is, like, we have 4 minutes before Michael joins us. I'm going to go check on my cell phone, like, just to make sure he's not having any trouble joining. But I had asked him to join at 8:30, so we still have 3 or 4 minutes. So you are feel free to stretch out, but don't go too far, because we're gonna resume the class pretty soon. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording for a few minutes. And then we'll go from there. Okay. So it is my great pleasure to welcome Michael Williams to the class today. Michael is a colleague with whom I worked on a recent project that was funded by the Mineta Transportation Institute from the SB1 fund, so from the gas tax funds. So it was a great project, and Michael is the foremost expert on edge lane roads in the United States. I think that statement is factually true. He maintains a website on edge lane roads. They're also called advisory bike lanes. So Michael, I invited Michael because that project directly relates with what we did in the class. There was another student, graduate student who took this class last year, worked on this project, Marcial Lemera. And Marcial, Michael, and I worked on this analysis. And then Michael refined that analysis to use the highway safety manual approaches to estimate the counterfactual estimate of safety if you left the edge lane roads that are in operation in the United States as 2-lane roads. And then we use that information to derive the crash modification factors for the edge lane roads facilities. He also did a lot of simulation analysis to figure out how many conflicts are going to be there, but that's not the focus of this this particular lecture that we are having. We want to just sort of reinforce the learning that we had on the highway safety manual, look at a real world application of that, and Michael is going to take us through some of the spreadsheet tool, one of the spreadsheet tool that he used, and then we are going to have an assignment on sort of looking at another edge lane road facility that was converted in from a 2-lane road and try to see if we can derive that information. So it is, again, my great pleasure. And without further ado, I will give the floor to Michael here. And I'll make sure that he can share his screen. And yes, so I'm going to make sure that he can share his screen here and take us to take us through that through the project. And again, thank you, Michael, for joining. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. All right, so I'll just dive right into the presentation. I am screen sharing, I'm being told. And everybody can see my title slide at this point? Okay, great. So thanks, everybody. Happy COVID. Let's get rolling. As Dr. Pandey said, we're going to be talking about edge lane roads and crash rate prediction. He asked me to talk a little bit about my career, present the video that we used to present our findings at TRB at this last meeting, and then we'll dive into some details on the spreadsheets we use to implement the HSM project level empirical Bayes method. So my career is it's not normal. All right, so I came to the civil engineering field late in life. I started out with a bachelor's in computer engineering and shortly followed that up with a master's in electrical engineering. And what I did for most of my early careers, I helped develop the first ever implantable defibrillator. And if you know what a defibrillator is, you've probably seen them on TV. It's where they've got the paddles. Someone's having issues with their heart. They don't often say what those issues are on TV, but it should be fibrillation if you're using a defibrillator. They slam the paddles down, they yell clear, boom, you give them a big shock. And depending on the importance of the character and the plot, they either are revived or not. So what we built was the first ever implantable defibrillator, which is like a pacemaker because it goes inside your body and it automatically detects that fibrillatory activity and delivers a shock automatically. So that was something I enjoyed greatly. Very stimulating work in the Silicon Valley, young guy working tons of hours, very fun, very fun. And then I moved to the sticks, did some contracting work or some consulting work back with folks in the Bay Area for a while, but then chose to pursue one of my lifelong hobbies, which was construction. And I ended up becoming a public works general contractor for almost as long as I was a computer engineer. We did roads, bridges, buildings. I wasn't out on site all the time. I did some estimation, project management, etc. And so that was a worthwhile experience, very useful for the third career of my life, which is civil engineering. And so this is also bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure is something I had also done as a hobby throughout my life, being a lifelong cyclist. And so I finally decided I'm going to go get my degree in civil engineering and start doing that as a profession. I went to Portland, attended Portland State University, an excellent school for that. Worked at Alta Planning and Design for a while, and now I'm out on my own. And as Dr. Ponde was so kind to suggest, I'm a kind of a national figure in terms of edge lane roads and hopefully other things. So the takeaway from this is don't even plan on having the same career all your life. A lot of people do, that's fine. A lot of people don't, that's fine as well. But always be looking to educate yourself, pursue your passions, et cetera, et cetera. You've heard it before, but I'm here to assure you that it's entirely possible to.
Can I add something here, Michael? I think you started out saving lives and you're still saving lives by doing the edge lane road.
There you go. Yeah. Lifesaver is my profession then.
Right.
All right. So enough on that. You don't want to hear from an old guy about what he's done in the past. All right. So then we're going to move to the video that we put together for the poster. Because of COVID, the TRB meeting this year was entirely remote. Normally a poster is in a big hall with many, many other posters, and people wander up and down looking at your posters and you have a chance to talk to them. So the video was a chance to have that conversation with the people looking at the poster without actually having a conversation. So we'll see if this works. I'm going to click on here. I think this is about 4 minutes long.
Looks like we don't have the sound on. Maybe it hasn't started yet.
Excuse me?
We don't have the sound yet, so I don't hear the audio of the video.
Okay, then.
I think you might have to, when you go to share screen, might be an option of, I'm going to pause the recording for a second. Okay, we're recording again.
And let's try restarting this. Hello, everybody, and welcome to my poster presentation. Is that good? On the safety performance of edge lane roads. For those of you who aren't aware, an edge lane road is a roadway that supports two-way motor vehicle traffic within a single center lane and vulnerable road users like cyclists and pedestrians in the edge lanes on either side. Motor vehicles can use the edge lanes after yielding to an
Something went wrong for me. I can't quite hear or see anything.
Oh, you know what? I muted my microphone. Are you getting any sound at all?
Now I am.
from me, but not from the video, right?
No, not from the video.
I'm sorry. Okay, let's. I'll keep my fingers off of things then. Hello, everybody, and welcome to my poster presentation on the safety performance of edge lane roads. Is that good? For those of you who aren't aware, an edge lane road is a roadway that supports two-way motor vehicle traffic within a single center lane and vulnerable road users like cyclists and pedestrians in the edge lanes on either side. Motor vehicles can use the edge lanes after yielding to any vulnerable road users there in order to pass approaching vehicles. This slide in the lower left shows you a schematic layout of the treatment, and on lower right shows you a picture of an. Did we just lose the sound again?
Yes, we did lose the sound again. Yes, we did lose the sound again. Maybe the other quick would be that if you have the video itself, maybe you can play it out of the slideshow.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to my poster presentation on the safety performance of edge lane roads. For those of you who aren't aware, an edge lane road is a roadway that supports two-way motor vehicle traffic within a single center lane and vulnerable road users like cyclists and pedestrians in the edge lanes on either side. Motor vehicles can use the edge lanes after yielding to any vulnerable road users there in order to pass approaching vehicles. This slide in the lower left shows you a schematic layout of the treatment, and on lower right shows you a picture of an edge lane road, my favorite edge lane road in the wild. While they've been used for decades in other countries, ELRs are relatively new to the US, and safety data on their operation here is scarce. Simple before-after analyses have been performed on 6 individual installations, and they showed favorable results, but a more rigorous study has not been performed to this point. This poster presents the results of such a study. What we did is looked at all known American edge lane roads. We looked at installation dates, what data was available on traffic volumes, and what data was available for crashes. 11 installations were found that had at least 5 years of pre-install or pre-ELR crash data and 3 years of post-install crash data. An empirical Bayes analysis was used to estimate the expected post-install crash rates for each ELR. From that data, we calculated both site-specific CMFs and an overall aggregate CMF value for the 11 sites and the more than 60 million motor vehicle trips. CMFs were calculated as a ratio of the actual 3-year post-install crash counts to the empirical Bayes estimated crash counts for the same period. We use the safety performance functions and the relevant CMFs for 2-lane roads and the project level approach described in the AASHTO Highway Safety. The results were quite good. Our aggregate CMF value came out to be 0.56. And again, that was calculated over these 11 sites and more than 60 million vehicle trips. 3 ELRs showed CMFs over 1.0, but these were artifacts of their low volumes and the crash types that were included in the analysis. For example, the Harvard Lane ELR is a very low volume neighborhood street of about 3 blocks in length. Almost no crashes on this street at all. The crash that created the fairly impressive CMF value of more than 2 was a crash involving someone trying to park their car at less than 5 miles an hour and bumping into another already parked car. So again, some of these individual ELR calculations are pretty limited in their relevance. hence the use of an aggregate CMF. Again, the post-install survey period was 3 years long, which reduces the chance that these improvements are only temporary. Here's the final poster. Includes a little more data, but really the same table, the same aggregate CMF value. The conclusions we reached were that based on this safety outcome and the fact that this treatment has been used for decades internationally, that it supports, both those pieces of data supports the transition of this treatment from experimental status to interim approval by the FHWA. Thank you. All right. So I don't know, when that video played on my screen, the resolution of some of the text wasn't very good, but here is the poster again in a little more readable format. Again, the key is the aggregate CMF over the 11 sites and the 60 million trips. So it looks pretty impressive. I won't claim that all edge lane roads will get that kind of safety improvement by any means, but it's certainly an encouraging trend, especially when you combine that or look at that in the context of a couple of other studies, a Dutch and a Danish study that really essentially found the same thing. All right, so now you know what an edge lane road is. You've seen a quick presentation of the final results of the work we did examining the safety of edge lane roads in North America. And so at this point, we're going to take a look at the spreadsheets that we use to implement the project level EB method, and from which we calculated the CMF values for the individual sites.
As you're opening the spreadsheet, Michael, so so these, okay, go. I was just going to ask if there are any questions about edge lane roads. For now, obviously, we're going to talk about, you guys know the empirical Bayes procedure a little bit, but now you're just going to see the spreadsheet implementation of it. But are there any questions about edge lane roads before we get into the HSM terminology and all that? You can type up the question or you can just ask it by raising your hand. Either one is good.
Thank you. I forgot to ask about questions.
What would happen if there were two cars coming from opposite ways on the road and there were already cyclists on the bike lanes? Would the cyclists just have to get off the road for a bit?
Well, so when you go to design an edge lane road, what you want to be sure of is that you have sufficient sight distance in order for drivers to be able to handle that sort of situation. If they're facing an approaching vehicle and they don't have room in the edge lanes to maneuver into, they need to slow down. One option is also to speed up. If you've got potentially a cyclist right next to you and maybe they're back a bit, you can speed up to get into the edge lane, or you can slow down to get into the edge lane. And of course, what you want to be sure as well is that you have enough sight distance for both drivers to come to a stop if the edge lane is completely unavailable to them.
That was the other part of the project, right, Michael? You did simulation, you ran the simulation models to see what kind of and how many conflicts are there going to be? What is the range of conflicts given the average speed, average count of pedestrian and vulnerable and bicyclists on the edge lane, and the vehicular traffic total, and directional split of the traffic. So yeah, there is a lot that goes into it. Like, you cannot put edge lane roads everywhere, but there is the idea is that you make those estimations through simulation and figure out that there are going to be enough gaps in traffic for all road users to be accommodated.
Correct. Yeah, the Achilles heel of this treatment is volume. So if you've got a lot of cars and you've got a lot of vulnerable road users on the road, you're not going to have the opportunities for cars to scoot over to accomplish the pass, and you end up with a congested facility that just, it doesn't reach its potential either in the safety arena or in the throughput arena or comfort arena.
Yeah, and then that's why, you know.
Any other questions on edge lane roads?
I just want to point out, like, you know,
Go
we
ahead,
did
I'm
that.
sorry.
Sorry, Michael. I just want to point out, like, in Australian outback, there are roads that are currently edge lane roads, and their upgrade of those facilities is that they sort of change them over to a 2-lane road facility. Because why they do that is because their volume have increased. They've identified some candidates where edge lane roads is no longer the operative. They don't want edge lane roads to be there anymore, and because the volume has grown, and as volume grows, yes, then that becomes a problem. And so that's the idea. So you do have to have those gaps in place, and as the volume grows, then those gaps could be very difficult to find. Just wanted to clarify that. So that was another sort of part of analysis of that project that relates to this question too. Okay, thank you, Will, for that question.
Any other questions on? All right, so I'm not hearing any other questions. Where we have a chat here, do we have any in the chat?
No, I don't see it. So I don't see it any in the chat, but please, as the questions come up, feel free to ask them. You can just put them in the chat for now and then go from there.
Okay, so before we dive into the spreadsheet portion of the presentation, I just wanted to make some terminology clear. So if you know Empirical Bayes method, you may know some of these things already. I apologize if so. First one, safety performance function. This is an equation derived at by a regression method that estimates the average crash frequency of a given site or site type with given base conditions. So it's going to tell you over a year how many crashes you should expect to get on a road that looks a certain way. And an SPF is often combined with a number of crash modification factors. And CMFs are a little different. They give you a measure of the change in the crash frequency for a well-defined change to the given road type or the given base conditions. If you change for example, the width of a lane on a rural road, what's going to happen on average to your crash frequency? And that's usually given as a percentage. And of course, we saw the CMF as the measure that we came up with in the results that were presented in the poster that I just discussed. Facility, standard term, the entity being studied. In terms of the HSM, it consists of one or more sites. And the HSM provides 3 facility types. You've got rural 2-lane roads, rural multi-lane highways, and urban suburban arterials, which is the facility type we'll be looking at today. The term site refers to a subset of a facility. A facility is composed of a contiguous chain of sites where each site is either a uniform roadway segment or an intersection. And the HSM provides 4 site types. You've got signalized and unsignalized intersections. You have divided road segments and undivided road segments. We're going to be dealing with both signalized and unsignalized intersections, and only with undivided road segments in this exercise. A segment is a portion of road, but it has to have a consistent cross section, and it's defined by 2 endpoints. Often those are intersections, but they can be other changes in conditions like on or off ramps, a change in conditions, or a change in characteristics such as traffic volume. In an intersection, pretty usual definition here. It's an area where 2 or more roadways meet, and includes the roadway and the roadside facilities that are used by both peds and bikes. All right, so the purpose of our study, as we talked about, I think we presented most of this information before, 5 years pre-data, 3 years post. We wanted to see what sort of safety impact an ELR installation had, 11 facilities, 8 years. And what we're talking about today is East 54th Street in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And this is kind of a conceptual, or is a conceptual diagram of the process we follow. You start out with your data on facility characteristics, how many lanes, how much traffic volume, do you have fixed objects on the side of your road, is there parking present, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You plug those characteristics into a safety model. In this case, we're using the urban-suburban arterial safety model. That data gets plugged into the SPFs and the CMFs, and turn the crank, you get an expected crash frequency for that facility and its characteristics. Then you combine that expected crash profile data with the observed or past crash profile data into the EB method, and that pops out with a future or predicted crash profile. And I say crash profile because this process not only generates crash numbers or crash frequencies, it also generates, can generate the types of crashes for a facility. And we have 2 procedures in the HSM for predicting crash rates using the EB method. We've got a site-specific and a project-level method. Site-specific is used when you have good data on location on each of your crash records. And I'll get into this, but crash data is often not as clean and nice as what you're going to get in this classroom. And so given the fact that crash data often has limitations that you can't do anything about, we chose to use the project level EB method, which is the route you are supposed to take when you're not quite sure about the location of some of your crashes on the facility you're studying. And within the HSM, have they looked at the HSM?
Yes, so they are aware of what HSM is. I shared with them, like, these different spreadsheet tools. I shared a link with them where there are different tools, different spreadsheet this morning. So they know of the spreadsheet and how sort of translate the theoretical knowledge. And those spreadsheets are in fact used to translate that theoretical knowledge that we have to actually using that information for a real project. So they are aware of them. They haven't used one yet.
Okay, so HSM has a bunch of different worksheets for doing different things. The spreadsheets we used were created by Dr. Karen Dixon, who was one of the folks that helped create the HSM to begin with. And again, they take facility characteristics and past crash profile data and return to us a future prediction of crash profile. So notes on using crash data, and this is something I wish somebody had told me before getting into looking at crash data and looking at research data in general, really. First of all, crash data, working with crash data is time intensive. And the reason it is time intensive is there's a lot of heuristic resources you're bringing to bear. Jumping ahead a little bit here, crash records almost always contain some amount of error and are often incomplete. You have a policeman filling out this crash form. Often it's originally filled out by hand and then transcribed, so you've got errors in that process. You've got a policeman who may have 30 other things he has to do that day. Maybe he hates paperwork, maybe he had a bad day, maybe the people involved in the crash are just telling him garbage and he has to make some assumptions. There are just innumerable sources of errors and conflicts that really make it amazing to me that crash records are even useful. But you can use them. Often the most valuable part of a crash record is the narrative that the officer writes out in longhand or types out. But crash data is defined on a state-by-state basis. They have forms that are created by law. So different states will record different types of information, and also policies regarding the availability of that data differ on a state-by-state basis, and sometimes even city-by-city. So it's often quite a struggle to go out and get the data, only to find out that it's not what you expected when you get it. So really the challenge is to create a consistent story from a crash record that jives with the maximum amount of data that you have in front of you. And from that, then you can make an assumption about location or fault or speed or root cause, et cetera, et cetera. And just as a note, just assume you're never going to have the correct input that you need when working with crash data. All right, so before we dive into the facility, are there any questions? Let me pause. Dr. Bonde, do you have anything you want to say? Questions?
No, I think this is very well described about the challenges of dealing with the crash data. This is very useful.
All right, so here we are in Minneapolis, very Midwestern kind of looking single family residential neighborhood. Minneapolis is one of the leaders in implementing edge lane roads. They have 7, maybe 8 by now, far more than any other agency in the US. So this is East 54th Street. To the left is a schematic of the layout. We've got some primary or major roads intersecting East 54th. 2 of them are signalized intersections. 1 of them is stop controlled. There are minor roads crossing East 54th between all of these major roads, but because we didn't have traffic volume data for those roads, we had to make some assumptions about those, which I'll get into. So we got minor roads in between all of these major roads. We've got driveways, we've got trees, and all of these will play into what we're going to be doing here. So now I need to reshare my Excel spreadsheet. Let me switch to that.
Michael, it'll be nice to show like an empty spreadsheet and a filled up one if you can manage that. Like if you could maybe potentially show them side by side, I think that'll be great.
I don't have an empty one, unfortunately.
Did I not? Maybe I emailed you.
You did send me one. Let me
Okay,
talk about my.
Yes, and we can show them at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I did is you folks have an empty spreadsheet right now, and it's the one that Karen Dixon created. What I did to use this spreadsheet a little more effectively or safely for me is I created a new sheet that collected all of the summary information for the site. Let's see. Now I can't tell. Let me get my zoom up to where I can see what you folks are seeing.
Yeah, so you might want to zoom into this a little bit.
Can you see my spreadsheet?
We can see the spreadsheet, but we can't really make out what's here. At least on my end, I'm not able to. What's going on in it? Yeah, I think you might have. I think there is a zoom on the bottom as well. Got a little bit better, but maybe zoom in a little bit further. Yeah. There is a sliding scale at the bottom right that you might be able to.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. Sorry, I'm used to. Okay, so now it's probably legible, but we can't see everything. So, all right. So what I did is I created a preamble sheet that collected all of the information that was needed for the worksheet. The topmost, the general info, some of that's needed for the worksheet. Some of it is just information that I wanted to have around. The next section, the CMF calculations, that was where I calculated the CMF for this site. And it takes the expected crash rate from the worksheets, multiplies it by 3 to get an expected crash rate over the 3-year post-installation period, and then of course calculates the CMF by comparing that to the observed crash rate. So what I wanted to show on this sheet was the segment and intersection data. And before I climb into this, let's do an overview of what this worksheet is. My tabs are in a little bit different order. So within this worksheet, we have the urban project total. And what that is this is, and I'm sure this, let me zoom in here a little bit. This is the summary sheet where each roadway segment and each intersection that the facility consists of has its crash frequency predicted. And then if you see here, the yellow cell down here in the middle of the screen, that's the only data that we are required to input. And that's what differentiates this project level method from the site specific method. If you notice above this yellow cell, there are quite a few other cells. All of the other cells above it are dashed. That means don't put any data in here because we're not sure of location information. So we can't assign the crashes to any particular segment or intersection. So what we do is we total those crashes up and we input them as one lump sum number. So this is for the entire facility. Worksheet 4A gives us a predicted number of crashes and type of crashes. Worksheet 4B for bike and ped, we didn't do bike and ped safety assessment on this project because the numbers were so low. So we're ignoring 4B and setting that to 0. And then with 4C over here, this is where we get the final results. This column 6 in the first row, that is your total crash frequency per year expected for this facility. So that's the urban project total. It sums everything up. I want to dive a little bit deeper now into a segment and an intersection worksheet. We're going to take a look at segment 1 here. I'm going to bop back to my general notes worksheet. I'm just going to show you here. So one of the things I did in the general info is I identified each segment and each intersection. And then down below here, I input all of the data needed by each of these segment and intersection worksheets. I listed that on my facility notes sheet, my preamble sheet, and then that gets copied to the individual segment and intersection worksheets. So you don't have this, but it makes things easy and easy to review for completeness. So if you look at here at the segment, the data the segment worksheet needs are things like how many driveways and what type of driveways do you have? What's your speed like on that road? How many fixed objects do you have per mile that someone might crash into? How, on average, how far away from the roadside are those fixed objects? Is the street lit? Is there on-street parking? What type of on-street parking? What's the traffic volume on the street? How long of a street are we looking at, or how long of a segment are we looking at? And of course, the roadway type. Here we are dealing with an undivided 2-lane road. So all of that information is gathered here, and then it's copied over into this segment worksheet, which I'll switch to here. This is the worksheet. The blue cells indicate information that you need to input as a user. In my case, it's just copied from that overall sheet. And then all of this data in the blue cells drives all of these worksheets and calculations down below. The first worksheet, 1B, they calculate the crash modification factors. How much is that crash rate going to change given the fixed objects, the trees, the power poles, etc., that line the road, and how far away they are? How is that crash rate frequency going to change due to the on-street parking that's there? And of course, if we don't have a condition in place, automated speed enforcement in this case, the CMF is just one, because what you do is you multiply all these CMFs together to come up with an aggregate CMF that is applied to the output of the safety performance function. And then the worksheets below the CMF worksheets, these calculate different collision type frequencies by severity level and by type. Here we've got the fatal and injury versus property damage only. And then in 1D, we've got the different crash types, rear end, head-on, angle, et cetera, et cetera. And there are 3 categories of 3 crash categories they cover here. You've got multiple vehicle driveway related, you've got single vehicle, and you've got multiple vehicle non-driveway related. So that collision type and severity is calculated for each of those 3 crash categories. And once you're done doing that, worksheet 1H, then you go into 1I and 1J, which we didn't use because of lack of data, the pedestrian and bicycle crash rates. And then the kind of the summary worksheets 1K and 1L, where you get down here a total predicted average crash frequency and a crash rate per mile per year for that segment alone. And as I said before, that's then brought back to the urban project total worksheet and collected with the others. So now we're going to take a look at intersection. And let's just pop back to the preamble sheet again. So intersection, this is the first intersection. This is all the information that's required to characterize an intersection for these safety models. You've got, this is a 4-way intersection signalized. That's what the 4SG means. You've got volumes on both the minor and major streets, whether there's lighting present, whether you've got left turn, phasing or lanes, how many lanes a pedestrian has to cross, number of bus stops, lots of stuff here. So let's take a look at the intersection worksheet that this data plugs into. Again, just like the segment, the blue cells indicate the data that you need to provide as a user of this worksheet. You've got the next worksheet calculating the crash modification factors for intersections. These are different CMFs than used for segments. You've got one for right turn on red, for example, the presence of right turn lanes, the presence of left turn signal phasing. So you have different CMFs for the intersections. But again, the same thing applies. You've got different crash categories, multiple vehicle, single vehicle, et cetera. And for all of those crash categories, they calculate both the breakdown by severity level and the breakdown by crash type. So that's 2C, 2D, 2E, 2F. And then we get into, again, just like the segment, you get into the vehicle and pedestrian collisions down here. 2G and 2H, again, we didn't use those. 2I, 2J. Let's see. And then we get into the summary worksheets, 2K and 2L. 2L, which is where we get the total predicted crash frequency, crashes per year. And again, that's bumped back up to the urban project total worksheet here, where you see here are the individual segments organized by crash category: multiple vehicle, non-driveway, single vehicle, multiple vehicle, driveway related. So you've got the 4 segments and the predicted crashes there for different types or different severities. And then the same thing for intersections. Intersection 1, you've got only multiple and single vehicle crash categories here for the intersection. And again, these are also summed up, broken down by severity, PDO, or fatal and injury, and compared to the actual number of crashes over the entire project or over the entire facility under study. And again, we skip the pedestrian and bicycle worksheet. And that drives down into our final number here. Well, let me show you what this worksheet's doing here. So it's broken down by crash severity, fatal and injury, property damage only. And then we've got the total here. And then we've got the predicted, and they sum up the PED, bike, and vehicle types of crashes here, with a total coming out at the end, 3.58. That is the number of crashes expected in 1 year over the facility being studied. And that 3.58, we come back to our preamble sheet, and here it appears. It's copied from that summary sheet, and then we do the CMF calculations. So I just went through a whole bunch of data, bouncing back and forth in a spreadsheet. I know I lost at least one of you, so there better be questions. Maybe I lost everybody, I don't know.
Yeah, so I think this was great. So this is a great overview of what happens in each spreadsheet. So remember, there were we input data for 4 segments and 3 intersections. So you'll have to fill up 7 different spreadsheets with those blue things, and you could do it like if you're looking at that original sheet, you could do it like just inputting data in there, or like what you could do is you could do what Michael did. Is he created like an input data sheet. What did you call it? I forgot. The facility notes? No.
The facility notes is the title, but I don't know. I called it a preamble sheet.
Yeah, preamble sheet.
Makes it easy to review.
Right. So basically, what each preamble sheet is doing is that from that preamble sheet, you take that information into those blue cells of the sheet. And again, you don't have to have a preamble sheet. You could directly input the data into the actual sheet. But then as you enter data, the numbers will change and so forth. So yeah, so that's basically what's happening. But you do have to input data for 7 different elements, right? So you do input data for 7 different elements. You're not inputting any crash data individually for those 7 elements. You're just inputting the design characteristics of those sites. And then once you input that and the actual crash counts per year, and that's another thing, the output of this spreadsheet is per year. So then you multiply that by 3 to get the 3-year number, and so on and so forth. So you do input to get the after data, you input that, for 3 years, you multiply that by 3. But as you recall, the pre-installation data was for a 5-year period. And in the yellow sheet that you saw in that urban project total sheet, that information was in fact for, divided by 5. So because it was 5-year data, and then you divide the total number of crashes that you observed that were, I believe it was 17 crashes or whatever, so, or 16 crashes. So you divide that by 5 to get the number 3.2 that was in that urban project total spreadsheet. So what I'll do is, maybe what I can do is I can send out the spreadsheet, this Minnesota spreadsheet to you guys, and then you could compare the Minnesota spreadsheet that Michael has and the empty spreadsheet that I sent out to you, and maybe kind of look at those two spreadsheets together, and see if you guys make sense for all of you. I mean, if Michael could be here, that's great. But again, I can answer those questions if there is any, if you come up with any differences. So my plan would be, you're welcome to ask Michael any questions right now. If there are anything that you want to ask, if there is some burning questions that you have right now, I'm sure there would be some, but then sometimes you don't know what to ask until you actually dive into things. And maybe, you don't know what questions you might have right this second, but maybe you will come up with more questions when I share this filled up Minnesota worksheet for you. And then I've already given you the empty spreadsheet from Oregon's, like Karen Dixon's worksheet. So when you look at those two spreadsheets side by side, maybe you'll come up with more questions, and I'll be happy to answer that in the time that we have remaining for the class today. But in the meantime, if you guys have any questions of Michael, please, there's a lot of information that went on here. So I'm hoping at least there would be some questions. And again, you could still ask questions about the edge lane roads, or you can ask about the CMF in the time that we have with Michael. You can ask your questions via chat, or you could raise your hand.
Should I stop sharing my screen?
Yeah, I think that's fine. That's probably okay. Any questions for Michael?
One note I will make is the creation of the preamble sheet was not as straightforward as I thought it would be. So for your students, you want to get this assignment done, preamble sheet might not be the way to go if you want to get it done in a time efficient manner.
Yeah, because I think once you change the whole structure of the spreadsheet, you have to make sure that all the cells are still calling the right cells and whatnot. But I think it's still be instructive to see how you make something useful. So again, you could directly work with, like when you work on with real data, I'm going to supply you with the data, but you don't necessarily have to have that preamble sheet. So you might directly be working with, as students, you might directly be working with inputting the information on that original sheet, but it'll still be useful for you to kind of analyze the differences between the two, what Michael's sheet looks like, versus what the original looks like.
Now, do they have facilities that they're going to be working with?
I haven't shared them with that. So that's going to be the next thing, that once they have seen this, I'm going to supply them with the data for one of these facilities that we analyzed, and have them work on it on their own.
Okay, the note I was going to add, I'm sorry, I'm hearing a big echo. Are you getting an echo on my voice?
Not on your voice. I do see some noise, but maybe I don't know what that is about. But
so the note I was going to make is, if you have more segments or more intersections than are provided for in that urban project total sheet, when you add rows in, you have to make sure that the rows you're adding are appropriately, that the equations inside each of the cells within the rows are appropriate for that row. I don't know if
that is a good point. So if you're looking at that Minnesota sheet, that's based on 4 segments and 3 intersections. But obviously, you know, there could be fewer or more or whatever. Like fewer is not a problem, but if there are more, you know, more intersections, or I mean, I'm going to keep the assignment somewhat simple here, just so we can get how all of this works. But if you obviously you could have a facility, a project that goes longer than that. So then, you know, when you add, you have to make sure that all the spreadsheets, like you're going to have to insert the rows. When you insert the rows, you're going to have to make sure that you're referencing, those rows are referencing the correct formulas as laid out in the spreadsheet. So that's a great point, Michael. Hey, are there any further questions for Michael? Because, you know, once Michael leaves, it's all me, and I'm going to have to explain all of that. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them. But that was wonderful. That was really helpful to see the process. And I think the next step is for them to sort of apply what they have seen. And obviously, I'm going to make a recording of this lecture available. So if you guys want to go back and take a look at it, so the next step will be to actually learn by doing, right? As we say in Cal Poly. So try to see if you can replicate this process on your own from a raw spreadsheet, and then add segments and add intersections as needed on one of the segments. And I'm going to make that assignment available to you as homework, but I do want to spend some time for the rest of our class kind of looking at the differences between what Michael's sheet looks like versus what's in the Oregon database. So I'm going to go over some of that a little bit after Michael leaves, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask right now, Michael. Okay, no more questions for you, Michael. So again, I really want to thank Michael. I really appreciate your time on this. This was really helpful, not just to learn about the project that that we did, but also, you know, just learning about your background. You know, some of these details I wasn't even aware of it. So that was just fantastic to know and learn. And yeah, so this was just great. And I'm gonna be sharing this video with them, and I hope you're okay with me putting this on YouTube and sharing, because I'm putting all of my class on YouTube. So this lecture, if you're okay with that, I'll just put it on there. But I know you are very open to sharing your information. Could you just post the URL for your website on the chat? So if you are interested in learning more about the facilities, that advisory bike lane or edge lane roads, as they're more appropriately called. So if you could put that URL. So if you're interested in learning more about, you know, how the traffic on both directions, the vehicular traffic on both directions could flow, you could visit this URL. Oh, so I think Michael, you typed it up privately, but I'll just share it with the whole class.
Oh, whoops, yeah.
Because I sent you a message, so it applied to that.
Right.
But I just sent it to everybody. So go ahead and check out that website. A lot of great information there. And I think there's some interesting things that could happen potentially with this treatment, because I know in a lot of urban facilities now, they're trying to use some of the lane space as restaurant space, right? Or dining space or parklets, and especially during this pandemic. So as you guys get into the workforce, maybe there would be more interest in from your superiors as to how do we make use of that street space. So maybe you can bring it up, and hopefully you can refer to our study, and that'll ensure that you're not fired on the spot for proposing 2 lanes of cars sort of going on the same lane, opposing side of cars. But yeah, this is very interesting facility. You know, once you get over the initial sort of hump of it, of like, you know, how the traffic in 2 directions is going to move, just, you know, because drivers are paying attention, I think that's part of why it makes it somewhat safer, and the numbers reflect that in the crash modification factor. So yeah, so thank you, Michael. I really appreciate your time. It was just great to see you again, and hope we get a chance to work more on this. And if you don't mind, if I teach this class again, I'd like to make this type of analysis, or if we do some future projects of this fixture, like maybe a permanent fixture of the class. So So this was just great, fantastic. Thank you very much, Michael. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I actually appreciate it because I had to go back and relearn what the heck it was I did. And I answered some questions I didn't realize I had through preparing for the class. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. So that is always great. And I hope you guys will check out the advisorybikelanes.com. A lot of great information there. And yeah, so thank you again, Michael. Appreciate
Sure.
it.
All right, we'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye, Michael. Perfect. So this was great. Again, now the real work begins. So I'm going to go ahead and send you the spreadsheet by email. I wanted to confirm with Michael before I sent his Minnesota spreadsheet to you guys. So I'm just sending it by email right now. And that also has the presentation, which I'm going to post online. And what I want you to do is, I want you to spend next 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes on, and maybe let's take maybe a 5-minute break first. So let's take a break until 9:40. And when we come back from the break, let's do a comparison between the spreadsheet that Michael sent out and the spreadsheet that I sent you earlier, which is an empty spreadsheet from Dr. Karen Dixon, and how Michael modified it. So you guys understand what's going on. You are going to be working with the empty spreadsheet for the most part, but I think it'll still be instructive to see. So what I would like you to do is ultimately, before we leave today, is make sure that you could work on the empty spreadsheet and get the same results that Michael has on his spreadsheet. Okay, so that's not your homework assignment. That's just something that I want to make sure that you guys have learned so that you are prepared. So when I provide you with real data from another site, you can work on it as your homework. So for now, we are going to try to replicate the Minnesota results, the East 54th Avenue results that Michael generated from his spreadsheet. Make sure that we can generate it from the empty spreadsheet that I sent you guys. So that's our goal for the remaining of this lecture. And I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording, and I'll ask you guys to take 10 minutes of break and then reconvene at 9:40 and review those two spreadsheets together and make sure that we can make sense of it. And if there are any questions whatsoever, you guys are going to ask me via chat or via in person. So let's take a 10-minute break and come back at 9:40 and just dive right into those spreadsheets and make sure that we can make sense of all that information. Thank you, guys. Hey, so welcome back, everybody. What I want to do now is first want to thank Michael for his excellent presentation and sharing his spreadsheets with us. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that I can demonstrate the process of getting the results that Michael got on his spreadsheet, and you can get the same results. You can get the same results on the raw spreadsheet that is by Dr. Karen Dixon that Michael started using as well. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and record that process of having two spreadsheets side by side and make sure that we could get the same results for at least one segment and make sure that we know the process of adding segments as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording for a second and then share my screen in a minute. Recording. Welcome back. So I have the spreadsheet set up side by side. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. So I'm going to just share the screen. So you see the two spreadsheets side by side. And on the left, I have the spreadsheet that I want to edit, which is the original spreadsheet. So I want to go ahead and edit that. So enable the editing on this. And I'll leave Michael's spreadsheet that he shared with us without the editing process. So this is what the spreadsheet look like right now. And you'll notice that, this spreadsheet, the original worksheet that has instructions on it, so you should review those. And then it has segment 1, segment 2, segment 3, and segment tables. Segment tables provide the data, the coefficients of the safety performance function. Yes, so I am recording. Yes, so segment tables provide the coefficients for the segment safety performance function. Intersection 1, intersection 2 are where you input the data. Intersection tables provide the safety performance function coefficient for the intersection. And then if you have information by site, then you input information by site. But as mentioned by Michael, that sometimes you don't have accurate data that is information on each site. Then you basically go to the project total worksheet, and that's where all of our outputs come out. And in this construction sheet, you don't delete that. That's just information for drop-down menus and stuff like that. Okay? So the thing that we are trying to do here is make sure that we can get the same data that Michael got for segment 1 and segment 2 and so forth. So the goal is to see if we can go to segment 1 here. So the goal is to be able to input this data into our spreadsheet. So I want to go to my spreadsheet here to segment 1. And remember, my segment 1 spreadsheet looks different because that's the original worksheet that I downloaded. This is where you provide all the information for your site. And the milepost obviously would be different, but let me see if I can get the actual number right. So our information is that it's a 2-lane undivided road. And I want to see if I can. Okay, so I'm at the 2-lane undivided road. So I'm basically copying the information from Michael's sheet onto my spreadsheet. The length here is this value here, which is a feet to mile conversion that we did. So I'm going to copy paste over. This doesn't want me to copy paste this over. The ADT is not 11,000, it's 4,329. It's a parallel residential parking, so I will just do parallel residential. That's the type of on-street parking. Proportion of curb length with on-street parking, it's 0.877. So you'll notice that the fields that are yellow, that's where you input the value. And the fields that are blue, that's where you input the input from a drop-down menu. So the median width is not present. Lightning present is present. And then you have the next one over is auto speed reinforcement. Obviously, that's not present either. And then you have information 0. Major commercial driveway, this is a residential one, so that's 0. Minor commercial driveways, just 1 here. And then major industrial driveways, again, 0 here. Minor industrial driveways, the number here is 4. Major residential is 0. Minor residential is 13. And then other driveways are 0. Posted speed is 30 miles per hour or lower. That's your drop-down menu. And then roadside fixed object density, how many fixed object per mile? That information we got from the site, 50. And then offset roadside object feet greater than 30 feet are not present, input 30. So we had about 10 objects that were away from that. So we'll just put 10 here. The offset in feet is 10 feet. The calibration factor, we're just going to input 1 for now because we don't have enough information. So we're just going to input 1. And this site is in Minnesota, but we're just going to make sure that, that a calibration factor is 1 here. So now, once I've input the information for segment 1, my urban project total spreadsheet in my file should give 0.115. So these numbers, 0.115, 0.166, 0.162, should align with the numbers that Michael obtained for his site. And I'm going to have to probably allow enable editing on Michael's to be able to see those things. Okay. So if you go to if you go to urban project total, I think which he put at the very beginning and we moved it to the end. So if you go to urban project total, you will see that numbers for multi-vehicle roadway crashes, it looks slightly different. So there is probably one thing that I do need to change somewhere, but they at least got in line for that. And then you will see, because I got updated that information for segment 1, all the segment 1 information has started to align a little bit, although there is slight differences there. So I'll have to make sure that I can see what's causing that difference. Maybe there is something that I didn't yet copy correctly. But that you will take your site's information and input that, and I'll work on it to make a note of why those numbers are not aligning in a little bit. But before I do that, I want to make sure that we are able to add more segments, because remember, we got 4 segments here, but there is no information for segment 3 and segment 4 because there's no spreadsheet on segment 3 and segment 4 for me. So what I'll do is I'll make a copy of that spreadsheet. Make a copy of the spreadsheet, move or copy, and I'll copy segment 1. I'll create a copy of segment 1, and I'll copy it over before segment table. Okay? So I'm creating a copy of segment 1, and I'm going to call that segment 3 now. Call it segment 3. And I'm going to take this segment 3 spreadsheet and make sure that my numbers for segment 3 spreadsheet align with Michael's. So I'm going to try to see, I'm going to align my numbers with Michael. So my length obviously would be different. So I'm going to copy this value over. So I'm going to copy the segment length. Doesn't want to copy it yet. So I'm just going to, and remember, Michael is taking all these values from facility note C83. I don't have that sheet, so I'm just going to basically provide that value to so it wants me to actually go to facility notes and get that value out, and that's okay. I can do that for segment 3 now. The length of the segment for segment 3. So I'm going to go to segment 3 information. I'm going to copy this value over. For some reason it's not letting me copy this, but we'll make sure. Copy. If it doesn't want to copy, I can just 0.249. 621. So copy this over. The ADT is still the same. Parallel residential value 0.57, and then I have not present, and then I have present and not present, and then 0. I'm just making sure that I copy this over. Minor commercial driveways. Value is 0. And minor industrial says institution driveways number. That number is 6 now. So I'll input 6 there. Minor residential drive, major residential drive is 0. Minor residential is 7. Other driveway is 0. 50, 10, and 1.0 is my factor. 50, 10, and 1.0 is the same number. So now I can save this. So if I look at now segment 3 numbers onto the urban project total spreadsheet that I have, oh, I don't see any numbers because I don't have any formulas in here. So what I'll need to do is I need to drag these formulas down, and I can drag them. And that gives me the same result as segment 2 because my formula is still referencing segment 2 spreadsheet. But remember, segment 2 numbers I haven't yet updated. So I'll just kind of change it over to segment 3. Just sort of drag this out. Dragging it out won't help because I have dollar signs in front of it. So I'll just kind of have to update it to segment 3. Same thing with segment 3 here. And then obviously want to do the same thing for for segment 2 and segment 3. I'll have to update that for segment 3. And now you'll see that the numbers start to look pretty close to, other than those numbers, that they start to look pretty close to Michael's. And I'll figure out what exactly is the difference between his spreadsheet and mine, but you get very close to those numbers. Okay, so just make sure that my goal was to be able to make sure that you can input those new numbers, and then you know how to copy another spreadsheet. And I will look carefully after I pause this recording. I'll look carefully as to what's causing the minor difference that we are seeing in Michael's numbers and mine, and I'll let you guys know by email, and I'll post it in the YouTube video notes as well. But for now, I hope you now know how to analyze your facility with using the spreadsheet that's there for the urban suburban arterials. And this spreadsheet actually provides you with the counterfactual crash information. Oh, I think part of that difference would be that this number should be 3.2 as well, because that's the number of crashes per year. And that number should be 3.2, not 34. So 3.20 is the number. I want to use that this is the number of observed crashes per year and not 34. I wonder if that was the difference. Now this is just using the predicted crashes, so that could not have been the difference. So what I'll do is I'll figure out that difference and I'll let you know. But you should start to see your final results predicted. And we did not care about the bicyclist pedestrian crashes, but you should now be able to get your predicted crashes and your total crashes here. And now you could figure out how many intersection crashes you have and how many segment crashes you have, and you could get the total number of crashes that you expect to see in your analysis. And make sure that you update all of these numbers for each intersection, for each crash type, to get your final numbers updated. And with that, I will go ahead and stop the recording, and you will see that the number that you're after is the expected crashes, and the expected crashes number will come out here. Obviously, my number are going to look different than Michael's number here because I haven't updated the segment 2, and I haven't done any updating to the intersections, but we got pretty close to his numbers for individual segment 1 and segment 3. And we need to update segment 2, and we have to make sure that we update segment intersection 3 and 4 and intersection 1 and 2 as well. Okay, and now my goal will be to give you data from another facility, where you will be able to estimate the counterfactual crashes. Remember, the goal of this spreadsheet analysis is to get the counterfactual crashes and then compare it to the number of per year crashes that you actually observed, and based on that, derive the crash modification factor. And that would be your assignment. Okay, with that, I'll stop it here. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.